Hello, Spookies, and welcome to Rick or Treat Horrorcast, hosted by yours, Ghoulie, Ricky J. Duarte. My guest today is Clover Welsh, aka Lady Clover Honey, a multimedia gender-fluid diva performing in the New York City and northern New Jersey area. She's graced notable hotspot stages from the Copacabana to Caroline's to historic haunts like the Pyramid Club and the Stonewall Inn. She even conducted an orchestra and sing-along at Carnegie Hall. Before RuPaul's Drag Race, Clover was putting drag on TV as a news correspondent on Under the Pink Carpet, reporting on the Metro nightlife scene on WNYE, the official television station of New York City. She also replaced Lady Bunny in the hit comedy When Joey Married Bobby off Broadway. An indie filmmaker, she created the award-winning comedy short Modest Male Exposure and the horror cult flick Drag to Death. Welcome to the podcast, Clover Welsh.
Hey, Ricky. Hey, everyone. It's so great to be here on the podcast.
I'm so happy to have you. You are one of the just quintessential New York entertainers. You are
Oh,
legendary and always a delight.
oh, thank you so much. You got to keep busy, right?
And you certainly do keep busy. You are a lady about town. You are always just attending these fabulous, gorgeous events. You're always looking stunning. I mean, you have
Oh,
such a storied history in the city. I mean, can you give us a little bit about your background aside from what I just talked about?
oh yeah. I just like to go out and have fun, and I present. I don't know if I'm a drag queen or I'm a transgender because I present myself as a lady, as a female. I just get all dolled up. It was always my dream. I was a little boy growing up in New Jersey. I always wanted to be a glamorous woman in Manhattan at the fancy clubs in Manhattan, and the dream came true. I just get all glamored up, put on my makeup, my wig, and go to the clubs in Manhattan, and the dream's coming true, being a Manhattan lady socialite. And I started performing, doing drag numbers, and I didn't never really like to just lip sync like other drag queens. I tried stand-up comedy and filmmaking and acting and all kinds of things that a woman would do or a drag queen would do. I could be both, a woman and a drag queen, but it's just fun I enjoy being a girl, and I just go and I enjoy New York City. So there you have it.
Well, you have so many talents. I didn't even realize you did stand up, but it makes so much sense because you're a riot and you just have this charisma and this charm. You have this quality about you that is so magnetic and always a joy to be around.
Oh, thank you. And you have a really good quality and aura about you too.
Thank you very much. Clover and I met through the horror scene at Horror Trivia here in New York City and, hit it off. Our mutual friend Jed is also frequently accompanying Clover. And I made an appearance in an upcoming film that they're working on together, a sequel to your film Modest Male Exposure. And I had such a great time on that set. It was such a wonderful, fun set and a great shoot. And thank you for asking me to be a part of that
Oh,
film.
thank you for being. You were really great. You play a tough guy, I should say, a tough straight guy.
I
Playing
know it
a
was
woman is, oh my God.
quite a venture for me as an actor. But I had a great time. I want to hear about Drag to Death, your new horror film. Please tell me all about it. It's a delight.
Oh
It's so
yeah.
good.
Well, that's it. I did also a character where a trans drag character is not the nicest person or a violent person. See, my it was a lot of fun to make. I always wanted to make a horror short, so I quickly made one with some friends. And my roommate has a lot of editing and shooting experience, and I could say he actually used to work in the porn industry,
Nice.
and actually created one of the biggest man-on-man porn companies called Latino Fan Club.
Nice.
You can still get the videos today if you want to Google it. So he was retired, and he said he'd help me do it. Because he's retired and was wanting something to do, I guess. So we did it, and we had a lot of fun doing it. I wrote a script, and people said the script was good. People like, this is a good script with a surprise ending, and there's a sort of a plot that applies to the thing. And it's sort of been done in fiction a lot, where mistaken identity. The plot is a drag queen got another drag queen to impersonate her on stage so she can murder her husband and have an alibi, which it really works a lot. And so many people mistaken took me for Lady Bunny. Just the
Oh,
other day,
sure.
I was going to rock, I'm walking down the street. I'm thinking I'm passing as a cisgender woman, and someone goes, "Oh, it's Lady Bunny, Lady Bunny." And there's so many people. So people don't really know one drag queen from the other. I guess it depends on the person, but when I took over for Lady Bunny, I heard people say, "Oh, we saw Lady Bunny last week," and I was like, "No, that was me." No, it was Lady Bunny. Like, no, that was me on stage. And like, I replaced her. She quit. So it really could work in real life. So then there was complications and blackmail and all the stuff that you have in horror movies in
Which we
the
love.
twist ending.
Which we love. And the film has recently appeared in a film festival, correct?
Yeah, and in Los Angeles, like Poor Life Choices Film Festival, which is a comedy film festival.
Right.
So it's doing good in the comedy film circus. It's a horror comedy camp, of course. When he had it screened, people are laughing and laughing. I was like, this is supposed to be a horror, not a comedy, but people laugh was nonstop laughter, which is a lot of fun to hear. Of course, it's great making people laugh.
Good. I'm so glad the audience reaction was so positive because it is a delightful film. Like I said, you are a joy to watch. You carry
Oh,
this film so well, and it's funny, it's witty, it's fast, and it's just there's one particular murder scene that I won't spoil it for
yeah.
viewers, but it was hysterical.
Yeah.
So good. Where can my listeners keep an eye out for your film?
You can check my social media pages. If you search Clover Welsh. We're hopefully it'll be in the Trauma Festival in at Beauty Bar in September. Also, there's a queer film festival in Portland, Oregon, and coming up. And then we hopefully will get it in the Jersey City Horror Film Festival. But these are coming up in the summer. Just nothing definitely scheduled right as of yet.
That's incredible. Congratulations on the success. It
Oh,
deserves it.
thank
You
you.
deserve it, my dear.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was also screened on Manhattan Cable
Oh, I didn't know
Television.
that.
Yeah, it was on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And it got a lot of, I forgot how many people they said saw it, like 3,000 or for the, so that was a lot of fun. And it was filmed and screened in Milford, Pennsylvania. There's a big gay community in Milford, Pennsylvania.
You're a star. You're an absolute star.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I can't wait for the movie that me and you are in together to be screened, even though we're not in the
We're
same
not in the same
scene. But
scene, but it was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see it either because I read, I read the screenplay for the whole film, and it's terrific. It's just
oh,
dripping with the kind of humor and quality that you and Jed and your entire wonderful circle of human beings, you just carry this aura, this welcoming, fun aura with you everywhere that you go.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to talk about the relationship between horror and the queer experience because it seems to be that a lot of queer people enjoy horror. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it enjoys part of like growing up different and not fitting into the mainstream. And then it feels like like horror is like you're used to, you want to live feelings on the edge. People into horror, they want to experience all kinds of human emotion, but you want to be safe. Nobody wants to really feeling fear in real life is terrible to
Mm.
feel, but you want to experience the thrill of all the different emotions in life. And if you're growing up queer and like different, you experience all the different feelings. You don't just fit into the mainstream where boy meets girl and then they lose girl and they get girl in the end and they're all happy. Life is like a roller coaster. There's all kinds of emotions that you feel when you're growing up queer that you don't, that not necessarily you see a pretty girl, you get her attention and then you're happy. It's not, so you want to have all the kinds of different emotions that horror gives, the suspense, the fear, and the camp and the comedy as well, which is also in a lot of horror.
I think that's a great point. The camp and the comedy we cling to, and then yeah, also the fear, the discomfort, the unknown, right? And the
Mm.
survival aspect as well. I think that's why
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of
the
queer
survival
people,
aspect.
yeah, relate to Final Girls. We really cling to them because of their strength and their, their fighting back and yeah, I think that's a really great point. What about, and because we are talking about a film today that has such controversial queer representation.
Yeah,
I'll
definitely.
just let the cat out of the bag. We are talking about the 1980 film Dressed to Kill today, and
Mhm.
I've actually wanted to talk about this movie for a very long time, but it's a complicated conversation. And so when you brought
Very.
this film to me, I was very excited to about it with you and get your insight on it. But so even separately from this film, queer representation in horror has always been there.
Right.
I mean,
Mhm.
from if we think of The Bride of Frankenstein, that movie's about two gay doctors playing dress up with a doll, like a
Yes.
woman doll, right? Like,
Right, right.
what? How have you observed queer representation shifting through the ages?
Well, now it's like, well, now you can be openly gay. Before, when you had the gay characters, you couldn't say they were gay
Mm,
or come out and identify. Like with Seiko, I guess, was the first cross-dressing character in 1960. He didn't come out and say, "Oh, I identify as a cross-dresser or I identify as a trans." And all the other gay characters, you couldn't say. It was don't ask, don't tell. And even at sometimes it's the very end, it's revealed. Like in Sleepaway Camp is the very very end, the big reveal. The spoiler warning, warning. But I don't want to say the spoiler. There's a big when I met Felissa at a horror convention. It was so much fun, you know. But I told her about the movie. It's
she
just like you
has
never know until the very end, you know.
she has been embraced by the queer community, and I love that she relishes in it, and that she jokes. She says the very first penis she ever saw was her own, which I think is hysterical.
Yeah, right.
Here's the disclaimer that I'm going to put out there. I am a cis man, and so I cannot speak to the trans experience. But what I can speak to is my observations of the people that I have heard talk about these films. And, Sleepaway Camp, there are people who have found it empowering because,
Yeah,
she kind of exacts revenge on those who are bullying her, right?
right. Mhm.
Dressed to Kill is a complicated film to talk about because coming from Brian De Palma, who is a controversial filmmaker in general,
Right,
and coming from a cis straight man's perspective about transgender, and the film uses the term transsexual throughout,
right. Mhm.
which I will move forward talking about this film in the world of the film, including pronouns used for characters that they may be out of date, but
Right.
I will express them the way that the film does
Mhm.
for sake of continuity. But Dress to Kill, it really depends on who you talk to about their read on this film. And even I, having seen it long ago when I was a child, revisiting it as an adult and watching it several times this week to prepare, I feel like every time I've watched this film, I've taken something different from it. I've had a different read.
Right. Yes.
I like it at one point, and then the next watch, I didn't like it, and I have problems with it. It's messy, but it's gorgeously shot. Well, all right, we came to talk about a movie. Let's. What do you say we go Rick or treating?
Right. Okay.
What is your relationship to Dressed to Kill? When was the first time you saw it?
I saw it like back when I was living at home when it was on cable. So it must have been in the early 80s. And I thought it was kind of like disgusting and creepy back when I first saw it.
Mm,
Before I was out to myself as trans. And you know, because it doesn't show trans people. I was not have ever never had any desire to murder people or anything. And back then there was no, so we've come so far in 40 years. It's just goes to show, and we still have far to go.
mm.
But 40 years ago, you never saw or heard of a trans person unless it was like a horror movie. So it makes them sound like sick, demented people who commit murder and are all messed up with their sexuality and fighting between should I be a man or should I be a woman? Because like nowadays, I just not. I present myself, go out as a man and present myself as a man too. Sometimes there's no big difference. People think, oh, is there a big difference in personality? And there's not really. I'm the same person, whether I'm presenting as a man or a woman. And maybe when I'm presenting as a woman, it's at a big party and stuff. And there is a difference in the way people treat you. But when I'm a glamorous girl at a party or a bar or something, it's going to be different, you know. But it's really not different. So it isn't. It isn't. Of course, I don't want to murder anyone who turns me on like that character did.
Sure. It's I saw the movie very young, and so going into it now as an adult and knowing the twist, right? And seeing
Yeah.
where this movie was coming, it felt very obvious to me the entire time. And I do wish that I had waited longer until I was of an age to understand what I was watching and understand more about cinema to see the film, because for me now looking back, it seems so obvious.
Yeah.
almost from the beginning, but I guess it wasn't when the film came out.
No, and I'm really into murder mysteries and I love Agatha Christie movies and books, and it was so easy to figure out who the murderer
Yeah.
was. It's so easy, especially when you watch it the second time.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, you're like, how could it, who else could it be? There was really no red herrings or anything.
Well, I was surprised watching this because I assumed that Bobby was played by Michael Caine in a wig the entire time, but not the case. Michael Caine didn't don the costume until the climax. It was actually a cis woman playing Bobby throughout the film, but the facial
Oh,
structure is so similar to Michael Caine's that it was just surprising to me to learn that.
no.
I read that Michael Caine the fragility of the straight man. He was worried about putting on a dress for the first time in his life
Really? Oh,
and refused to wear panties because he said something to the effect of, what if it made me a cross-dresser if I put on panties? What if it triggered something in me? And I'm like, for God's sake, you're one of the best actors of our time. Like, how?
yeah, right. Like when straight men say, I can't go into a gay bar. What if a man wants to have sex with me? Like, oh, why don't you just not have sex with him?
Right, yeah.
It's
Or
like,
I
okay,
don't
I'll
know,
have
it's
sex with you and I'll like it and I'm gay. Like, oh, fuck.
it's always the man who a gay man would never want to have sex with who says something like that, by
Right.
the
I
way.
mean, you want to say, don't worry about it.
Well, the film opened to a lot of controversy, not only for its representation of trans people, but also for its treatment of women. De Palma is
Right.
oftentimes accused of brutality against women and, frankly, exploitation. And it's undeniable, right, that this is featured in many of his films.
Mhm.
I do love De Palma films for their stylistic nature. I love the split screen.
Yeah, the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, and this film does it cleverly because it's not as traditional like Carrie with the split screen or
Right.
Phantom of the Paradise. It's a little more blurred. It's a little more with intention, you
Right. Like,
know?
you remember the panties in the taxi cab is all things
Exactly.
like that. And yeah.
Yeah. And also the use of deep focus. So instead of an actual split screen, you'll have action in the foreground and the background. And he
Right.
utilized that in this, I thought, very effectively in place of just a straight up split screen.
Right.
The film was protested by women's
Oh,
groups,
yeah. For women's groups for the exploitation. Yeah.
the exploitation for the opening scene, which expresses a rape fantasy.
And gratuitous female nudity.
Yeah,
There's a lot of vaginas show. They didn't really show vaginas a lot. They did a
no.
lot of breasts and ass, but there was the vagina there.
Within opening moments of this film,
Yeah.
the opening sequence was originally not going to be what it is. It was going to showcase Bobby performing a crude castration on herself, and then it was
Oh,
changed and altered to Kate's opening scene, which we'll get to in a moment. But I think it was a much better choice to open it the way that it did. I love the first 30 minutes of this film. I think it's some
oh
of the
yeah.
best filmmaking of all time. Angie Dickinson, there was talk about maybe an Oscar nomination. She
Yeah, she
didn't get
really
it.
was robbed. She should have been. A lot of the acting she did with her, not without dialogue, was just facial
Yeah.
expressions.
Yeah. I mean, the whole museum sequence is just stunning
But then even
performance.
even after after her sex scene, all the emotions, how she was thinking, and then even when she saw his name,
Yeah.
oh, she now I know the name of the person I had sex with. You could tell, and of course when she
You
saw the VD papers and when she's going out in the elevator,
Well,
and
and you see it all in her face. It's an incredible performance, and she was a popular television actor at the time, so this
yeah,
was quite a different role for her. She was apprehensive at first about taking it,
right.
and then ended up doing it. And I mean, for me, she makes the film.
Yes. Of course, her body double was like a penthouse of the year 1977. She, much younger than her.
Right. Which, as I was watching it, I was like, well, this is clearly a body double. And then when you realize that it's a fantasy sequence, it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense.
Yeah, you don't want
Right.
to fantasize having a nice body, a young body.
Right.
Yeah.
The film draws a lot of parallels to Hitchcock, specifically
Oh
Psycho,
yeah, specifically where the main character dies like a half hour into the movie and like
right?
that, and a gruesome death, and
Where I think this film succeeds is, and I love Psycho, I'm not trashing
yeah,
Psycho,
right.
but after Janet Leigh is killed, the movie for me never picks up as much steam as she was carrying
Right.
with it. This film, I feel, does uh,
Yes.
really steamroll through
Oh yeah.
and keep going. I just think Janet Leigh, you spend so much time in her face and in her thoughts that when she's gone, we're left, I mean, purposely clueless, right? And Anthony Perkins is remarkable in that film, but it
Yeah.
never really reaches the same level of suspense for me. Whereas Dress to Kill, I think, has multiple successful suspense
Oh
scenes.
yeah. Hmm.
Well, what do you say we get into the plot of this film?
Okay.
All right. So, as I mentioned, 1980, Dress to Kill, written and directed by Brian De Palma, starring Michael Caine, Angie Dickinson, and Nancy Allen, who was also in Carrie and married to Brian De Palma at the
Yeah, she
time,
was married to him at the time. Yeah.
and would follow this up with Blowout, which I have not seen. Have you seen Blowout?
Yes, actually, I have seen it. Yeah, just like this is just this week.
Really, I wanted to. In researching this, I realized how many De Palma films I've actually not seen, and I felt a little
Oh,
ashamed. Yeah, I need to. I need to
yeah, he
jump
has all
in.
the horror back then. Like the sexual thriller was style in the early 80s.
I love a good sexual thriller.
So Dress to Kill was like a sexual thriller, a murder mystery, a horror. So it was
And
a lot rolled up into one.
very much so, and all at once, and very, very in your face. The score for this film is by Pino Donaggio, who did the score for Carrie, and you can really hear the similarities. A lot of
Yeah.
hyper feminine string music, and then very, it's all very over the top,
Yeah,
which
very melodramatic movie.
yeah, yeah.
Almost like for a romance.
It worked a lot with Brian De Palma, and I also found out also did the score for Seed of Chucky, which I think is
Oh, he
hilarious.
did. Oh,
And then gorgeous cinematography by Ralph D. Bode. And this film is just shot absolutely stunningly. It's gorgeous to look
oh
at.
yeah, really. The beautiful New York City locations.
Yeah, I love seeing New York in this time
Yeah.
period. It's kind of the New York that I always thought I was going to move to, and obviously was far too late for.
Well, yeah.
So we start with opening credits over gentle feminine string music, a soft glow pan over a bedroom into a beautiful, elaborate bathroom. It's
Right.
very similar to the opening of Carrie, right? With the
Right.
shower scene and the naked girls running around. We see Kate Miller, who is played
Right.
by Angie Dickinson in the shower, watching her husband Mike, played by Fred Weber, as he shaves using a straight razor in the mirror.
Right.
She's sensually feeling her breasts and her vagina while she's soaping herself. There's a brief emphasis on her wedding ring.
Right.
And a man approaches from behind her and
Mhm.
covers her mouth and starts kissing her neck aggressively. And it's unclear to us if if he wants to kill her or if he wants to have sex with her.
Right.
And she
It's just fake
screams
her.
and screams out, yes. And so this is the fantasy that was so upsetting to so many people. It becomes complicated because we cut to her in bed with her husband,
Right.
getting passionlessly jackhammered by
Right. Yeah. She's
him.
like bored with it, unfulfilled. So definitely.
Right. And so, it's like, is she imagining this more sensual fantasy where she's separated from her husband by glass,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
But then accosted by a man, is that coming from what she really desires? Or is it coming
Right.
from being accosted by her husband in bed,
Right.
literally in real time?
Yeah. Like being accosted by her husband and not enjoying it because you're supposed to enjoy sex, but she's obviously not enjoying it with her husband.
Very unfulfilled. She
Yeah.
plays, kind of the unfulfilled housewife
Right.
quite well.
Hmm.
She goes to her son Peter's room, played by Keith Gordon,
Right.
who was in Christine.
Yes.
He's
He looks
Arnie.
just like Harry Potter. He's
Oh my
a
God, he
nerd.
dies.
She's like, oh, she has a Harry Potter son who's in that machine he invented. But not nowadays, everybody's on your little phone. He had this big machine that he said, what was it do? It holds numbers, binary numbers.
Yeah, which I think even the use of the word binary, which probably was not in the queer vernacular back then,
Yeah,
right? But this film is very full of binary oh, what's the word? Comparisons,
right,
right? Even the relationship between him and his mother versus him and Liz, the
right,
prostitute later on, or in this scene, she compares Napoleon. Napoleon was a general and Napoleon was a baker, two unlike things, right? Kind of a
right,
masculine and a feminine.
right,
We get a lot of that, but for me, those statements are made, but they're not explored well enough, or they're not utilized. Maybe they're just there to give us hints.
right. And she
Uh,
says she doesn't. She wants him to. Apparently, he hasn't been sleeping, and she's always concerned. No, go to sleep at night. Like that's also the binary of day and night. Like he kept it the same. He just worked all day, all night, instead of resting at night like you're supposed to.
you know what? That's a great point that I
Mhm.
hadn't thought of, and it feeds into one of my reads on him at the end of the film
Right.
that we'll get to. This character is very inspired by De Palma. He kind of wrote the nerdy inventor computer whiz after
Right.
himself.
Oh, okay.
For me, it's a little bit like MacGyver slash Inspector Gadget. He just
Yeah.
like
Right.
he just always has some machine that he's invented to save the day. But they have a nice
Yeah.
conversation. You know, at first she scolds him for being up all night. And then, you know, she tells him she's proud and excited for him. And he does explain this new computer circuit. He was supposed to go with her to the museum.
Right.
Is it the Met? The Met.
Yes, the Metropolitan. Actually, it was filmed in Philadelphia, the interior,
Right, right.
but it was supposed to be the Metropolitan, and the outside was the Met. Yeah.
Well, that's what threw me off because I was like, I've been to the Met. This doesn't look like the Met. But then she's standing outside of it and it's the Met.
Yeah.
But you know, she excuses him and says,
Yeah.
you know, keep working. I'll just go on my own. And so he keeps working on his invention. She goes to see her psychiatrist, Dr. Robert Elliott, played by Michael Caine.
Mhm.
How talk to me about Michael Caine's performance in this film? How do you feel about it?
I think it was really good the way he well, you don't know it's him performing on the voice machine as Bobby.
Mm,
He's having conversations. I guess that was probably when the answering machine was first invented in the 80s. You could have
hmm.
conversations with people from voice machines. But he was like very sophisticated and intelligent, very cool too. You wouldn't think he was this hot-headed killer
No.
or this hot split personality. I mean, he was just very cool and sophisticated, and he didn't have sex with Kate said, "Well, would you have sex with me?" He said, "No, I wouldn't, because I'm married and I'm the doctor." But she goes, "Well, why wouldn't you have sex with me?" So that gets him like bothers him because of course, he would want to have he would like to have sex with her, with Kate. But he's just very cool. No, I don't have sex with my patients. I don't have sex with women I'm not married to, and just keeping it cool. Even when
He
he spoke to the police detectives, he's like, "No, I'm gonna keep it cool. My medical ethics."
he yes, that's I he's very we don't get to know him super well,
Right,
which is by design. When she walks into his office, he's serving as his own receptionist. So here he
right,
is doing
yeah.
quote the masculine and the feminine at the same time,
Well, yeah,
right?
that's another binary. Yeah,
Yeah. She divulges that, you know, she's unhappy. Her mother is thinking of coming up for her birthday and she's guilty because she doesn't want to see her mother. And
yeah.
yes,
That's classic psychoanalyst. Yeah,
I
everybody hates their
know.
mother when they go to the psychiatrist. Like,
They have the conversation, you know, I'm dissatisfied with my husband. Well, would you sleep with me? Yes, but I won't because I'm a doctor and I'm married. And he does catch himself in the mirror when he says this. And this happens frequently. It seems that oftentimes when he is aroused, he sees himself in the mirror, which is going to
right,
be, I think, an interesting thing because spoiler everybody, Dr. Elliot is a trans person whose alter ego is the killer in this film.
right.
I think the startling himself in the mirror comes from a couple things. Obviously, the duality, right? But then
Right.
also seeing yourself in the mirror and not seeing yourself in the mirror,
Right.
being
Mhm.
surprised by the reflection that's looking back at you,
Yes.
um, is I think an interesting tactic in the movie. So he tells her, you know, sleeping with you would not be worth jeopardizing my marriage, and he says, "Would it be worth jeopardizing yours?" And she says, "I don't
Yeah.
know." And we cut to Kate sitting at the museum. She's looking at
Right.
paintings.
Mhm.
They seem to be looking back at her and they
Right.
stir like an array of emotion. And it really is Angie's performance that just like there's so little dialogue, no dialogue
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
next
No
like
dialogue.
15 minutes.
Just she's taking notes and she's making a shopping list and as
Yeah,
he's
for
taking
Thanksgiving
notes.
dinner. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's observing others in the space. There are a pair of lovers, or a man tries to talk to a woman. A little girl
Mhm.
runs away from her parents. It's very
Yeah.
still. There's no music. It's a
Right.
patient, like quiet and immersive
Mhm.
scene.
Right.
And then a man sits next to her. Seems handsome. He's behind big dark glasses. He kind of a little bit looks like Michael Caine behind those glasses.
Oh,
Um,
a little bit. Yeah.
Maybe, right? And I have to wonder too, is this the man from her fantasy earlier that came up behind her?
Oh.
They notice one another and I think this is a super queer coded moment. So De Palma originally was wanted to make a movie of cruising, and he was attached. He wrote a
Right.
script for cruising, and it fell through. And so when I think it was Friedkin, right, William
Mhm.
Friedkin, who made that film,
Right.
he took ideas from his version of cruising and put them into this film. So this whole scene is Kate and this man cruising one another. It's a very queer. I mean, the tapping of the foot, right,
Oh
is
yeah, and also the dropping of the glove too.
hmm. Yeah, signals, giving signals
Yeah,
to one another, stealing glances, a smirk or a smile. It's
yeah.
it's it's a very
She's stalking him. He's stalking her.
exactly. It's a back and forth trading of gender roles, right? The prey
Mhm.
and the predator. She removes a glove and reveals her wedding ring,
Right.
and it can be interpreted as her trying to be like, no, I'm married, or it could be like, hey, I'm married, this could just be a one-off. It's
Oh yeah.
unclear her
Yeah.
motivation. There's, she follows him from gallery to gallery. When she stands, her glove falls to the ground.
Yeah.
When she finally works up the nerve to speak to him, he's gone.
Right.
She walks past her lost glove, which is picked up by an unseen hand, and then we see the gloved hand touch her
Right.
shoulder. It
Yeah.
startles her,
Yeah.
and she walks away. It's her would-be suitor. It's the man now wearing the
Right.
glove.
Yeah.
And when
The,
she,
the, she got what she wanted and she got scared to go through with it.
yeah, yeah. Upon realizing that she's missing her glove, she returns to the bench and realizes then, oh, the man was wearing my glove. He was being flirty, wanders from room to room, and finally comes across him, but now he's hurrying away from her.
Yeah.
And she starts pursuing him, and she loses track of him, and she leaves the museum. And she
Right.
tosses her single glove to the ground.
Just litters like that. So she's
I
just
know.
a dog, yeah, like
I know. Well, but then it's a little bit like what good is one glove without the other, right?
yeah,
And maybe that's how she's feeling.
yeah.
Again, if it's a binary driven film, right, it takes two.
Takes two gloves. You don't wear one glove. Yeah.
This is also the first time that we see any semblance of Bobby, because we see a hand pick up that glove from the ground,
Right.
but we don't know who it is yet. She does notice her other glove is waving from a taxi cab window, and it is the man, and he's
Yeah.
beckoning her with it. She approaches the cab and starts to apologize for being rude, but is abruptly pulled inside and kissed
Mhm. Yeah,
passionately.
right.
This man ravages her, laying her in the back seat of the cab as she navigates the complicated emotions of what's taking place. It's this
Taking off her panties.
takes off her panties, takes off her stockings.
The cab driver enjoyed it though. He got off on it.
He totally does. He's like
Yeah.
trying not to look, but he's
Yeah.
looking. I mean, De Palma's films are so voyeuristic, right? It's so
Yeah.
frequently someone watching someone else. And I
Right.
think that comes from a lot of his Hitchcock inspiration.
Yeah. Mhm.
He goes down on her and she lets out a moan that is uh, almost like a scream. It's the orgasm that her husband didn't give her that morning.
Yeah, right.
The man
Definitely.
takes her to his apartment building, and then hours later, she wakes up. I think it's around 7 p.m. if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
and she gets dressed quietly, leaving him in the bed. As you said, she sits at a desk. She calls her husband and then hangs up
Right.
instantly.
Yeah.
Uh, and then she starts to write a note, like I loved our afternoon. Maybe we'll see each other. And
Mhm.
smiling to herself, like you said, she sees his ID card. Now she knows the name of the man, and it's all very exciting to her. And then realizes she comes across a medical record from
Right.
the New York City Department of Health informing the man that he has contracted a venereal disease with an exclamation
Actually,
point.
it's actually two venereal diseases. Right?
Syphilis and gonorrhea,
Yeah.
right?
So they're curable disease. Were they curable back in the 80s? I guess they were just take a lot of penicillin. I
I
heard.
guess. I've heard. So I've been told. I
Yeah.
mean, here's the thing, right? I think I, I don't know what the treatment would have been like back then, but for a married woman,
Yeah.
you know, this is just awful because now she's caught,
Yeah.
and
Right.
she's gonna have to tell her husband, or give it, or pass it on to him. She So her joy turns to horror, and she starts rushing out of the apartment and into the hall to the elevator. She is waiting for it, and we see the blonde figure in large dark glasses watching her from the door to the stairwell,
Right. Yeah.
bathed in red light. So This film is very inspired by Giallo, a lot of Argento influence, and so there are just a couple moments of unnatural lighting, including this red light on our stalker. Kate gets into the elevator and starts heading down, but then she realizes she left her wedding ring behind in one of those great split screens
Yeah.
after being stared at by a creepy young girl who's like, she's already feeling guilty. You can see it in her
Yeah.
face.
No.
And then this little girl
Girl
gets in and is just judging her.
staring at her mother goes, it's not polite to stare, but doesn't stop her,
Not at all. She returns to the man's floor to collect her ring. Her eyes are welling with tears, but when the door opens, the blonde woman in large dark sunglasses wearing a leather trench coat wields a large straight razor and attacks her, slices, gashes her hand open.
Right.
The killer steps into the elevator and the doors close behind her as Kate is sliced and slashed repeatedly, and then slides down the wall of the elevator, very much like Janet Leigh down the wall of the shower in
Oh yeah,
Psycho.
right.
Clear ode to that film.
And she's wearing all white. Her whole outfit is totally white, which emphasizes the red.
Emphasizes the red. It's also an unnatural red. It's a very giallo, bright red,
Yeah, right.
right? And it's not as dark as real blood would be. And yes, it I hate to call it a beautifully shot scene, but it's a beautifully shot scene,
Oh yeah,
for what's
definitely.
happening, for the horror. It's really well done. I think that the statuesque figure of our killer with the trench coat and the sunglasses and the razor blade, I think it has this iconic style to it, you know?
Well, straight razors, because men don't really shave with straight razors anymore, do they? We don't shave at all, but we have that not nice beard, but that's a very horror classic thing, having a straight razor, right? Being killed with a straight razor.
Very much. It's a horrific weapon for sure. And, it is kind of tied to masculinity as well. The shaving of a face. We'll learn where the razor came from. And then at the end of our discussion, I have another theory about why a razor was selected as the weapon in this film. The elevator door opens. And a high end call girl named Liz Blake, played by Nancy Allen, who's terrific in this film. She's absolutely just wonderful.
And she just got a stock tip from one of her tricks. Of
Yeah.
person. I wrote it down. What is she? With
Uh,
the
audio realm,
Autotran. So
Autotran.
she gets not only gets paid, but she gets good stock trips or insider training information. So he tells her what stock to buy.
Well, and this is a little bit of my theory on her, right? Kate is trying to be a little more adventurous, a little more promiscuous, whereas Liz is trying, like, she's working toward wealth. And so it's a little
Right,
bit of like trading, wanting to trade places. I think that
right.
Liz is an interesting depiction of a prostitute because she's not ashamed of what she does.
No.
She's very self-assured, she's courageous, right?
Mhm.
And really interesting, especially for 1980, depiction of a sex worker.
Oh yeah, it's very dual. The two women, like Kate is very ashamed of her sex and very is secretive and not enjoying sex, and Liz is really enjoying sex and getting empowering her, getting money making tips and everything from it.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly it. She's empowered by it. One of the John that she's with, the client that she's with, sees what's happening in the elevator and runs away like a coward. And Liz is left
Right.
alone, and Kate reaches out for help. Now, our killer is ducked behind the elevator door on the inside, and as the door slides close, Liz sees the killer in the mirror
Yeah.
swinging the blade, which is dropped. Liz grabs the blade as the door closes, leaving Kate alone in the elevator with the killer. Liz, now holding the murder weapon, runs down the stairs as a maid assumes that she has committed the murder and starts screaming. When Kate reaches the bottom floor, the elevator door is trying to close repeatedly on Kate's bloody left hand, the wedding ring hand, which is now missing the ring because she
Right.
left it at the apartment.
But don't the elevator doors open once don't they have sensors?
I thought that too. I don't know. In 1980, did they still have the sensors like that? I didn't.
Like I said, a lot of the residential elevators maybe didn't have them. The residential places and older buildings.
It's a 35-minute opening to this film that I just it's one of the, I think, best filmed murder scenes of all time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It stays with me. The whole sequence, Kate's character, she's in it for so brief a time, but she does such a wonderful job with it.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
you feel for her, you know? I mean, when you're seeing the numbers on the elevator elevate as she's going back to the seventh floor to get her wedding ring, we know these are her final moments, but she's
Yeah.
spending them in shame and grief, and it's very upsetting. It does a lot. So we cut to Dr. Elliot, Michael Caine, getting
Mhm.
home and listening to voicemails, and one of them is from a former patient named Bobby. Now, he
Right.
startles upon hearing this name, and we learn that Dr. Elliot has refused to see Bobby anymore. Bobby is unhappy and expresses that they are a girl inside this man's body, and the doctor won't help get her out. They've gotten a new shrink who will sign the papers so they can
To
get
get
the operation.
the sexual reassignment surgery operation.
hmm And it's the word the operation, I feel
Yeah.
like was
Right.
what was used in this time to just uh uh imply,
Oh, yeah,
right?
even for decades, it was you would say post-op, pre-op,
hmm
and just the op was such a definitive
Yeah.
thing to
Yeah.
have.
Um Bobby says that she borrowed the doctor's razor, and he'll read all about the murder in the papers. Some blonde bitch saw it, but she got away.
And she'll
Bob,
get the blonde bitch.
she'll get the blonde bitch. Bobby
Yeah.
tells Dr. Elliot to tell the new doctor not to make her be a bad girl again before hanging up the phone.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Elliot sees that his razor is indeed missing, and the next voicemail is from Detective Marino, played by Dennis Franz. He's so good in this role.
Oh yeah, he is.
He informs it that one of his patients, Kate Miller, was killed tonight and asks that he come down to the precinct to answer some questions. And Dr. startles himself in a mirror again.
Yeah. Mhm.
So we're going to cut to the police station. Liz is identified by the maid from the building as she's looking at mugshots of blonde women. Dr. Elliot arrives at the station and meets Peter, Kate's son, who blames himself for her death, saying he had gone to the museum with her. Had he gone to the museum with her,
Right.
she'd still be alive.
She would be cruising. Yeah.
Right, exactly. We learned that his father was killed in Vietnam. And so now he is essentially an orphan, right? He doesn't have a good
Right.
relationship with his stepfather.
Right.
So those roles of father, mother are now missing from his life.
Right.
He has, no parental guidance. And Dr. Elliot gives him his card before being summoned to Detective Marino. Now, Peter pulls out this listening device that he's
Yeah.
invented
Right.
where he can record what they're talking about in the other room. And
Here,
it's just,
I want to get one of those. Just put it on the wall, and you can hear what's in the next room.
I
Just
don't want to know what people are saying about me in the next room, girl.
and record it as well, not just hear, but record it.
So this is like another voyeurism kind of example for De Palma, right? Like it's
Oh yeah.
auditory,
Mhm.
listening in. This is a great example of that deep focus where it's foreground. We can see the conversation in the office, and then background we can see Peter listening. Learns that his mother had shacked up with this man from the museum, and that Liz had seen the murder.
Right.
Dr. Elliot tells Detective Marino that Kate had had marriage problems, but he won't give him any details about it.
Right.
And we learn that Dr. Elliot does some work at Bellevue, and Detective Marino asks if Kate may have met one of the psychos that he treats.
Yeah. I think he said weirdos.
He says weirdos. Okay.
Yeah. They're not weirdos, they're troubled people, or something.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
calls them persons suffering from emotional dysfunction and a problem of maladaptation.
Yeah, it's not weirdos. Yeah. Or psychos, whatever.
Well, so
Yeah.
he takes his practice very seriously.
Yeah.
And so these patients from Bellevue never come to his office. So there's no way that she could have met one of them. But the detective wants to look at a list of all of his patients from that morning, and Dr. Elliot insists that he is going to protect the anonymity of his patients.
Right.
Peter hears this suggestion, but is then collected by his stepfather. Dr. Elliot notices a file on Liz Blake on the desk.
Yeah, he sees her name, her address, her phone number, so he knows exactly where she lives.
Yes, all of
So if
it.
Bobby wants to get Liz, she knows where she lives now.
Knows where to go.
It's right there for the this film doesn't really make cops look that good either.
No, not at all.
Also, he was so mean to Liz, who's not the killer. He was so nice to Dr. Elliot and so respectful to Dr. Elliot, who was the killer. He's
Right.
harassing someone who didn't kill him, being nice to the real killer. It's like, you know,
No, that's a great point. I mean, he's treating her so poorly when they have their discussion in a minute.
yeah,
Now, later, Dr. Elliot leaves a message at an answering machine service, assumingly for Bobby. He's trying to get a hold of Bobby. Is that correct?
yeah,
Yeah, says, please have her call me back. And then Liz is questioned by Detective Marino.
Right.
He jokes about her being a call girl,
Right.
saying, everybody is getting laid after lunch in that building. And she says, well, I didn't say I was getting laid.
Yeah.
He shows her file for being arrested for disorderly conduct and solicitation at a Park Avenue hotel. And he tells her that she may be a Park Avenue whore, but she's still a whore.
It's still a horror. Yeah.
Belittles her and
Yeah.
questions her about her client, insisting that she find him and get him to come sign a statement.
Right.
He threatens her and he gives her 48 hours.
Right. You threatens her.
Yeah. She calls the escort service and asks if she can see the man whose name is Ted again, but he won't be back for a couple of weeks.
Right. And not to the escorts or her agency woman. Her name was Norma.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a nod to Psycho.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Norman's mom was Norma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
completely.
yeah. So her John was our hookup agent was Norma. Yeah.
Peter rides his motorbike to Dr. Elliott's office and records the amount of time it takes his patients to leave, like how often they're leaving.
Right.
And then he goes home and does like a bunch of graphs and math
Yeah.
and science work to invent a camera that will take pictures based on the average amount of time that it takes them to exit. I gotta say, Clover, this whole Peter as a scientist thing distracts me from the movie.
Yeah.
It's a bit
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. He's doesn't even work. He's just a student, right?
Yeah.
He's not even a,
Yeah. I mean, is he in high school or is he in college, do we think?
they don't even, for me, it could be either one by his age. It could
Yeah.
be,
Meanwhile, Liz arrives at home and she lives on Nassau, so she's a downtown girl.
so sweet. Yep.
She's being watched by a blonde woman in a leather trench coat. The next day, Peter arrives back at Dr. Elliott's office and he sets this camera invention up, aimed at the door to take pictures. We get another voicemail for Dr. Elliott from Bobby complaining that he's never in and that he's stalking that nosy, or she is stalking that nosy bitch. She's found out where she lives, and we get maybe the most De Palma split screen of all of them, of the blonde woman watching Liz through her window. Liz is calling about buying stock because she's so savvy, right?
That tip that she got right before she found
Mm-hmm.
Kate's body was
Yep.
that she's going to buy that stock.
Arranges to meet a new client so that she can pay for the stock.
Right.
As Dr. Elliott turns on Donahue and watches, this was a real clip from a Donahue episode of a trans
Oh,
woman named Nancy Hunt, who was,
yeah.
I did a little bit of research on her. There was a profile written about her in People magazine,
Right.
and it was actually like sympathetic, and it was a very like, this is what a trans life is like. And she appeared on Donahue talking about her history and her background. She was a war correspondent, and she does
Yeah.
mention that a lot of trans people have, quote, real macho backgrounds.
People didn't realize, people figured if you want to be a woman, you'd probably have a feminine man or a hairdresser who wants to be a
Hmm.
woman, but they have very masculine lives and are married to women and father children.
Yeah, I do. I think it's interesting for 1980. Donahue says, so you were married, you had children, you enjoyed and then he says, I don't want to say normal. That's a pretty prejudicial way to put it.
Yeah, that's a good line.
And he said he changes it to traditional. And it's like, oh, this was a real thing that Donahue actually said on live TV. Like, I think that was really, wait, I'm going to make this quick. My grandma was on Phil Donahue.
She was. Oh, congratulations.
I'll make this really quick. So, she married a man who had multiple wives and was taking their money. They made a Lifetime movie about her called "Addicted to His Love,"
Oh,
starring Barry Bostwick.
yeah.
And so she appeared on the Donahue Show
Wow.
back in the 80s. I know. So anyway, Liz visits this client to pay for the stock that she called about, and upon leaving the Sheraton, she's watched by this blonde woman, presumably Bobby. She notices this and tells her really cute cab driver to take
Yeah,
her
yeah.
home. He was in Friday the 13th Part
Yeah,
2.
was he with Jeff? Was his name? Yeah, he was in
Yeah.
13 part two. So,
Yeah.
yeah, well, when
So
do you find a cab driver that looks like that?
I know. No, never once in my life. A chase ensues through the cities of New York or streets of New York.
Yeah,
The blonde woman is in another cab pursuing her.
right,
They try to lose the other cab and they can't.
right.
He drops Liz off at Columbus Circle and he asks her out as she
Yeah,
gets out of the
that's
cab,
good.
and she says, "Sure."
She doesn't give her phone number to contact her. She goes, sure, I'll go on a date with you. She didn't have to pay for the cab ride.
Right,
And it
right.
didn't deliver, so you don't have to pay. She goes, I'll be taking her on a date. She goes, sure, bye.
She runs off, and then as
Yeah.
he looks in the rear view and he sees the blonde woman walking past the cab, so he opens the door and knocks her to the ground in an attempt to help Liz buy some time and get away. However, when Liz exits the subway station, the blonde woman is standing outside her apartment now. She runs back into the subway to escape. She jumps the turnstile and starts waiting on the platform for a train. The sequence is so uncomfortable for me because she stands next to a group of black men.
Yeah, a group of four black, but what did she want to hide behind them or
I
something?
think like for
Yeah,
protection, but then they start accosting her. They threaten to rape her. It's a
yeah.
really
For
uncomfortable.
rape, just because she was standing next to them, they say, "Oh, we'll rape you because you came right next."
Yeah, it's an icky use of black men to put a white
Yeah,
woman in danger. You know,
yeah, for no
it's
reason.
for
Yeah,
yeah,
because
really
she was near them.
unnecessary.
I was like,
Uh,
stay away from black men, or you'll be in danger if you're close.
right.
But yeah,
Well, and then she gets on the train, and now there's a black cop, and I almost feel like that's De Palma being like, "See, I'm not racist. Black people can be
yeah.
cops too." It's really, I don't know.
So she
Um,
has four black men trying to rape her and one white woman trying to kill her. She's
yeah.
running through the subway. She'd be glad she gets like, sees a cop, and then she says, "Oh, never mind," and just walks away from the cop. But you have
He's
like
not
five
very
people.
helpful, and he
Yeah,
even gives her a very stern, menacing look as well. And this scene on the train, I mean, the platform is really well shot. The train, as she's getting on, we see Bobby get on the train in the background
right.
as well.
Yeah,
So Bobby is then seen standing between the train cars, looking in the
right,
window at Liz, but then disappears.
right.
Now, the cop exits, and the group of men from before start chasing Liz
Yeah.
from car to car. Between two cars, she finds herself face to face with Bobby, and the men run away when they see Bobby produce a razor and attack Liz. But fucking Peter just comes out of nowhere and
Right.
sprays Bobby with a homemade mace.
Homemade made this one white. Why would it be white? You know?
That's a good point. God, it just looks it's we hear Bobby scream and run away. This homemade pepper spray causes temporary blindness. He's like
Maybe.
MacGyver dog. It's too much for me.
And also, doesn't Bobby wear sunglasses? So the mace was just her sunglasses, or maybe they fell off.
That's a great point,
Yeah,
actually. And they're big sunglasses. Those are
yeah,
like she's wearing goggles practically.
yeah.
So he had followed the blonde woman from Dr. Elliott's office and that led him straight to Liz. Now they're back at Liz's apartment and they talk about how Peter misses his mom, Kate. This for me is the beginning of almost a maternal relationship between Liz and Peter.
Yeah.
She even calls him kiddo. Like she keeps saying, "You're just a kid." She says it multiple times throughout the film, which I do think goes somewhere. I don't think I'm crazy about this point, this read that I have. The next day, Liz goes to the station and tells Detective Marino she was almost killed by this blonde woman. She suggests, like, hey, get your hands on this patient ledger, but he can't until there's a search warrant. So then he suggests she
Yeah.
goes and gets it herself, or he's going to book her tomorrow.
So you have to threaten people to do the police work for you to put her life in danger. Like cops sign up to put their life in danger to find evidence, but the cops just tell, oh, you find it. We don't want to be bothered. We don't have to wait. You know?
No, well, and we'll find out later
Yeah.
exactly how fucking lazy he was with this entire investigation.
Yeah.
Dr. Elliot visits Dr. Levy, Bobby's new doctor.
Right.
And this is a scene I only rewatched the film. I watched the film one more time today, and I don't know why I didn't pick up on this scene before. This is the first time that Dr. Levy has ever seen Dr. Elliot. Like Dr. Levy has met Bobby
Right.
multiple times. And
Right.
so you can
Oh,
see in his face he's putting together Bobby and Dr. Elliot. Dr. Elliot doesn't know that Bobby exists within himself, right?
right.
And I think he realizes the truth here. He's putting things together. So Peter reviews the film that he took from outside Dr. Elliot's office, and they get an image of Bobby leaving, and they
Right.
deduce that she must have been the last appointment.
She was the last one to leave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To get the book, Liz visits Dr. Elliot to talk about the experience of seeing Kate murdered, and it's a great scene. It's
Yeah.
very, very good.
And she strips down to her underwear, which is fun. You know?
She absolutely does. Like she explains a terrible nightmare that she has had involving a razor and a fantasy again. So that's relating her to Kate as well. She looks across the street out the window. She sees Peter watching with binoculars, so he's there.
Right.
And she starts talking about she likes what she does. She likes turning men on, and she's starting to seduce Dr. Elliot. The conversation turns, and he asks if she's sexually attracted to him. She says yes. He says he's attracted to her as well. She says, "Do you want to fuck me?" And he says he does, but he won't because he's a doctor and he's married. And she calls him on it. She's like, "I don't think you're that married. Like, I see the bulge in your pants." And
Yeah.
do you think that Dr. Elliot is even married?
Yeah, I don't. I would say not. No, they don't make
No.
a wife, or and how would the wife would know if you're not if you're running around dressed as a woman? The wife would know that you're not even. Yeah, he probably just
I
says that.
I think it's an interesting
Yeah.
clue into Dr. Elliot because he's someone who kind of stands for his patients and he won't divulge their information. And you think that he's a really honest person, and yet he seems to be lying about having a wife.
Right.
So, yes, she takes off her coat, revealing no pants. She's in black lingerie, thigh highs, garters. I mean,
Mhm.
sexy, sexy. She excuses herself to powder her nose as encourages him to undress while she's away. And he looks at himself in the mirror, catches himself, and
Yeah.
smiles as he undoes his tie, which we think is for him to undress to be with her, but also he's undressing to transition into Bobby right now,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because he's been aroused. Liz sneaks through desk drawers and finds the ledger as Peter sees Dr. Elliot undressing through the window. He also sees a woman's face or a reflection of her face in the window across the street, but trips on his way over to investigate.
Right.
Liz collects the information on the last patient in the book,
Mhm.
and as Peter stands, he is accosted from behind by a large blonde woman.
That looks like Bobby.
Looks like Bobby.
Like where could she like she yeah, it was very confusing because Bobby's two places at once. So how could this happen? It was
Right. Well, because this had kind of happened before when the cabbie knocks her over, and then she's also already at Liz's place.
right.
Simultaneously, Bobby is seen looking out the window from inside. Liz returns, calling for Dr. Elliot. We see Bobby in the darkness. It's a great shot, just a flash of
Mhm.
lightning behind her. She sees Peter struggling outside the window as Bobby sneaks up on her with the razor blade. The woman from outside shoots Bobby through the window, who falls to the ground. And when her wig falls off, we see
Yeah.
that Bobby is actually Dr. Elliot.
You got the big reveal.
The big reveal. There is a clue at the very beginning of this movie because the name placard on his office door is Robert Elliot. So Bobby is an affectionate
Oh,
name for
yeah.
Robert, but you're never going to put that together unless you
No.
are looking for it.
Right. Hmm.
We cut to the station where we learn that Detective Luce is a quote police person, as like a polite
Right.
term for policewoman, who was assigned to follow Liz dressed as Bobby.
Right.
It's very confounded to me, I have to say.
Why would
This
she like wear the she just happens to be a blonde policewoman that likes to wear big sunglasses.
it's a big ask of your audience to go
Yeah.
along with this. This scene is straight out of Psycho. After Norman
Yeah.
is revealed to be dressing as his mother, we get the explanation to the audience about what they just saw and what is a cross-dresser versus a transsexual. And it's very much that. For me, I hate that scene in Psycho. I think the film would have worked even better without that.
Yeah.
In this film, it's kind of cheesy, but we learn from Dr. Levy that Bobby is a quote transsexual whose quote male side wouldn't let
Right.
her go through the sex change operation. So again, 1980, the assumption that a
Yeah.
trans person would have a male side and a female side.
Right. And you can they can't the two can't exist together.
Right.
And also now we know that you don't even have to get an operation to be trans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But that was such a it was the
If you want to be
definitive.
trans, you have to cut your dick off. But my man side likes the dick, and I don't want to
Right.
cut like so I'll go crazy and kill people.
Well, and then now this is also comparing the trans experience to multiple personalities.
Yeah, that absolutely.
And so this is where, it becomes even messier of
Yeah,
a
even
plot
dual
device.
personality. Yeah,
Hmm.
people often say isn't trans like very psycho schizophrenic. Oh, you gotta be schizophrenic to be trans, or you have to be a drag queen. You have to have two personalities. Like, no, you don't. It's just a way of expressing yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the male side wouldn't let Dr. Elliot go through with the sex change operation.
Right.
When he met Dr. Elliot separate from Bobby, that's when he put it all together.
Yeah.
And so we learned that when Dr. Elliot is sexually aroused, Bobby took over and went on killing sprees. We also learned that Detective Marino was using Liz as bait this entire time.
Yep. That was real.
He never thought that she'd killed Kate, and he used her to get into Dr. Elliot's office and had Detective Luce follow her around to keep her safe.
Yeah.
Big old cop out. It doesn't work for
Yeah.
me plot wise, I gotta say.
And I think it ruined the big reveal moment as well by having something else going on as the big reveal is happening.
Yeah, it really does. For me, this and there's still like 20 plus minutes left of the movie.
Yeah.
This big climax is not it's not as climactic as I feel like it could or should have been.
Yeah. Yeah, they
I,
messed with it by having the different stuff going on at the same time.
yeah, for sure. So we cut to Liz and Peter having lunch at the top of the World Trade Center.
Mhm.
Um, this is such a strange scene to me. They are talking about the details of transitioning as a trans person.
Mhm.
She uses, they're talking casually, but with fascination. And I almost wonder if it's a little bit turning them on as well. And this is where I lean into wondering if there's a little bit of trans curiosity within Peter, because she
Oh,
makes the comment like all they want to do is have their sex changed, and she starts explaining it, female hormones, and he says it's a science experiment. Instead of building a computer, he could build a woman out of himself.
hmm.
There's a woman behind him who's overhearing this
Yeah.
conversation.
But older women had a table filled with older women. Yeah.
Who is shaken and indignant at what they're talking about. She does describe a penectomy and describes the slicing down the middle of the penis. Now, this is where I think the razor blade as a weapon comes into play, because a razor blade is a slice down like an obelisk shape
Oh.
where the blade extends from it. And so I have to wonder if that was an intentional choice to
Hmm.
compare it to a penectomy. It's a very crude explanation of a procedure that should be very personal and very it's just these people have no business talking so casually about this, in my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah.
It's a weird scene. She calls him a kid again. She calls
Hmm.
him, kiddo, and I'm gonna miss you. You made me feel safe. And he invites her to come with him to his house. His stepfather's out of town on business. So we also learn that Dr. Elliot is now a patient at Bellevue. And if he's ever
Right.
sane enough to leave, he'll be tried and she'll be the star witness.
Yeah.
Now we cut to a cartoonish representation of a mental hospital.
Right. Yeah.
Bathed in blue light. We get that giallo feeling again, I feel,
Right.
as patients wander around in straitjackets. A nurse approaches Dr. Elliot's bed. She's wearing a very sexy costume, like a very sexy nurse
Yeah.
outfit, low cut, tight, form fitting. Dr. Elliot strangles her, and it's a really interesting moment for Michael Caine as an actor, because he makes like the killer, scary psycho face that I don't think
Yeah.
he's ever made in any other movie before.
Oh no, he hasn't. Yeah.
He slowly and methodically undresses her as the maniacal patients watch and encourage it. It's a really interesting shot. There's like levels above with balconies of all
Right.
of these patients watching this happen.
More about the voyeuristic aspects. He's being watched by a
That's a
balcony of audience members.
that's a great point. I hadn't even picked up on that. So we cut to Liz's apartment where we hear a window be broken. I only noticed this last time too. Outside the broken window, that blue lighting is out there as well, which is
Oh,
going to feed into the reveal of this scene, I
yeah.
think, as well.
And another shower scene like Psycho.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, Nancy has said that she was, as so many people, horrified of the psycho shower scene. And so when De Palma wrote this scene for her, he didn't even know that she was so afraid of this shower scene. And it was like this surreal moment where she got to do her own scary shower scene years after being so disturbed by Psycho. Bobby sneaks in. Liz hears something and gets nervous. We see the nurse's shoes creeping up slowly toward the bathroom, and Liz sees them with the legs inside of them standing just outside the bathroom door. This is kind of a funny device to me.
Yeah.
Starts looking around for some sort of weapon, and she opens the mirror above her sink and she sees a razor. But we see that the shoes are now empty, left like empty outside the door. And Bobby now stands behind her. Bobby slashes her throat with a razor, and then Liz wakes up from her nightmare.
Yeah. It turned out to be a nightmare.
and she's
Explains why
screaming.
a regular nurse's shoes would be able to fit Dr. Elliot. Like
The
if
whole
when
costume, as he was undressing that nurse, I was like, oh, it's a good thing they're the same size.
it's a good thing that the zipper is in the front, so you can easily unzip it and undress it.
Yes, exactly.
You know, they're the
Now,
same size. Yeah.
Liz is now screaming from the nightmare in Kate's bed, where Kate had sex with her husband at the opening of the film, right? As Peter is comforting her. And I feel like now this maternal relationship between Peter and Liz has become full circle maternal because she is now traumatized in the bed where his mother
Right.
was experiencing sexual trauma.
You know, Peter was not in the bed with her. He came running into the room. Yeah.
Right. And that's the end of the film. It's a very Carrie moment for sure, with
Yeah.
the waking up from a nightmare and then being comforted by a loved one.
Right.
And that's our movie. That's Dressed to
Yeah.
Kill.
Like I said, how we've come so far away in representing trans people from 40 years ago to now it's all over. I don't know if I said before, but I think the villains and the slashes and the harm don't have to always be cis heteros white men. They could have all kinds of minorities, like trans people could be murderers. But back then, there was no representation except for the murderers
Right.
in horror movies. That was the first representation we had in mainstream.
That's a great point, is that, murderers can be queer people, but every murderer, like every queer person you see, should
They're
not
not
be a
right.
murderer.
Right. Every straight man you see isn't a murderer, but
Right.
Freddy Krueger and Jason are straight. You know, they are straight, right? Jason is straight.
Freddy is. I don't know anything about Jason. Freddy
Yeah,
uh
Freddy's,
presumably is.
yeah,
I don't know. Freddy could be a little queer. I
yeah,
feel like he'd experiment. But we get kind of the Norman Bates in Psycho.
right. Yeah,
We
Norman
get
Bates, yeah,
Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. And I will, to Silence of the Lambs credit, Clarice, Detective Starling, does make a statement clarifying the mental state of Buffalo Bill and saying that she is not trans, but that she's
right.
disturbed. And the film, I think, maybe tries to rectify it, but doesn't do a strong enough job.
Yeah,
This movie, we don't get a lot of. I almost wish that we got, and this would never happen because the entire crux of the film is this reveal, but to know a little bit more about Bobby's journey or who
yeah,
Bobby is, because we never do.
yeah. Or to struggle with Dr. Elliot, like if I know a CPA that she just came out as trans and her kept the same clients, but he'd have to his could ruin his career.
Right.
Dr. Elliot, if he came out as a trans woman, then he'd have to find a new career. People wouldn't respect him as a therapist anymore, which I don't think is the case today, but
No, there are plenty
40
of,
years ago,
yeah,
you couldn't do
plenty of
that.
trans therapists and doctors out there. I mean, it, I I still struggle with where I place this film for me personally because, again, direction, cinematography, acting, performances are all incredible.
Yeah, incredible.
It's very misguided and very messy. This is what I will say. I am someone who believes that consumption does not equal endorsement, and that for me, it is possible to enjoy problematic material as long as you are able to recognize the problematic
Right.
aspects of it and
Yeah,
discuss them,
absolutely.
right? If we
Yeah,
cancel
absolutely.
everything problematic, we're left with very little.
It just introduces people that trans is there in the world, even though they're not all split personality mass murderers, but you know,
Yeah, it's complicated. And I wish that the film dealt with the trans experience in a more complicated way than as quote binary as it really
right,
does, right? And
right.
comparing it to psychotic behavior. But whew, well,
Yeah.
on Rick or Treat Horrorcast, there's a rating system. A
Oh,
movie
okay.
is either a trick, which means it's okay, it's
Mhm.
a treat, which means you love it, or it is a smell my feet, which means it sucks. Clover, how do you rate Dress to Kill?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. It was really very well made, very well spoken of, and it introduces trans people in the world, even though they're not all mass murderers, you know. It was very stylish. The people know that there are people going through this like struggle that you feel like you're a woman, but I want to express yourself as a woman, but you're born and labeled as a man. But not that you'll be a killer or you'll be crazy, but it's just out there. And I like the way the style, of course, it ruined. Nobody could cruise the Met anymore, so it ruined that. So other than that,
That's true. That's
Yeah.
absolutely true. You know, I think from a filmmaking perspective, I call it a treat, but I do struggle to get past its representation. But then conversely, so maybe there were people who had never seen their lived experience showcased before, and if this could have given them any sort of semblance of
Yeah.
I'm not alone, it just is a shame to me that it would then be compared to, malicious behavior.
Right.
I think I'm gonna have to place this in the trick category for myself, which means it's okay, but like on the high end of trick, because it, it is worth watching. I think that it is very much a film worth watching. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it, but I think that
Right.
there's importance behind this film and the conversation that it sparks.
Right. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
to show how far we've come when trans issues and trans representation, we've come so far. We still have more to go, but
Yeah, that's a great point. We have to recognize how far we've come in order to motivate us to keep moving forward, because you're
right.
right, there's so much further to go.
Yeah. No, that was more besides Psycho, that was like the one that really showed that trans issues more in a mainstream movie too, in a mainstream
Mhm.
weekend movie, but a big but had big stars in it as well. So I
Yeah.
think that for that thing alone, like it's worth it,
Yeah, for sure. Well, Clover, I can't thank you enough for being
Oh,
on the podcast.
well, thank you. I'm so happy to be it. Here, I always love horror movies and listening to them and hearing them. I've seen other of your podcasts. They're a lot of fun.
Thank you. I'm really, really happy to have had you. Will you remind my listeners where they can stalk you, where they can find you on social media?
Oh yeah, you can search Clover Welsh on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, and Clover, because in Welsh, like meaning from Wales. I'm not from Wales. I'm from Irish, but that's actually my real family name is Welsh, and I mean, I'm not from Wales. I'm from New Jersey. That was the joke that people. So that's what the name means. So
Excellent. Well,
yeah.
and you can follow the podcast at Rick or Treat Pod on all social media platforms. My website is rickortreat.com, and check out the YouTube channel. Just type in Rick or Treat Horrorcast.
Oh yeah, check it out. It's a lot of fun.
That's the show. Thank you again, Clover.
Thank you again.
And we'll see y'all later,
Okay,
spookies.
bye bye.
Thanks for coming Rick or Treating. It'd be a real scream if you'd take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. The show's spooky intro and outro music is a cover of Camille Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre, with orchestrations composed and performed by Lestat von Monlicht. My website, rickortreat.com, is designed and maintained by Evelyn DeVere. The show's social media content is created by my evil minion and social media manager, Stanley Martin. The Rick or Treat logo was designed by Philip Romano. Contact information and links to these artists can be found in the episode description. Check them out, they're frighteningly talented. Rick or Treat Horrorcast is independently produced by me, Ricky J. Duarte, of Rick or Treat Productions. If you like what you heard, tell a fiend. I mean, friend. If you didn't, well, they're coming to get you, listener.